are so excited to welcome Mariana Melo-Vega in today. Mariana is going to help us not panic in the street, talking all about cultural narratives and how we can take hold of those for our research. Mariana is a cultural insights researcher. Oh, what happened to my screen? Y'all can still see me, right? Okay. Mariana is a cultural insights researcher focused primarily on Latin American cultural studies and cultural theories, expertise in race and ethnicity, gender and sexuality, indigenous cultures, and trauma-informed research. She is currently an ideator apprentice, we love that, at SSRS, working in qualitative and survey research. Mariana, I'm so excited for you to join us today. Please take it away.
Hello, everyone. I'm gonna share my screen. And how do I make this right from the start? Okay, wonderful.
Perfect.
Can you hear me well?
Yes, we can.
Okay, excellent. So I am going to read a bit, hopefully not completely, but there's a lot to cover, and I want to make sure that we can sort of touch on different aspects of such a wide topic. The presentation is about emotions as cultural narratives. And so when we think of emotions, most often we think of sensations outside of our control, sensations that are biological and that they are felt in the body. These are sensations that we share with animals. And in fact, Charles Darwin wrote a book in 1872 called The Expression of Emotions in Man and Animals, in which he made that link. And you can see here in the illustrations how photographs and drawings he used to show how animals make similar facial expressions, such as the snarl, even if very subtle in humans, when in the anger, or the raising of the hair when in fear. And that's actually something that still happens to us, like biologically. The biology of emotions is also relevant when thinking of the unity of humankind. Human beings of different races, ethnicities, and cultures being joined in a single group due to the commonality of our emotional sensations, so people from different points in time and different cultures feeling something like sadness. There has been much debate about which emotions would be our basic emotions, or whatever name you choose to call it. Some of the most commonly mentioned are joy. Some people call it happiness. There's a debate about it being a mood or an emotion. Distress, some people would call it sadness. Anger, fear, surprise, and disgust, all with their corresponding also facial expressions. But when we think of emotions as part of culture, we are not negating the biology of emotions, or at least of certain emotions, such as what some researchers call basic emotions. We're adding a nuance of historical, geographical, and cultural context to our understanding of emotions. Let us first start by stating that the very word emotion is quite recent in history, dating back to the 17th century French and only used widely in English with its current meaning in the 19th century. Before this time in the West, plenty of other words were used, including feelings, sentiments, affects, and passions. These different words, and sort of that's the point, reflect a different understanding about what an emotion actually is. Are emotions, for instance, psychological states, mental states? Are they felt in the mind, in the body, in the soul? Are they governed or regulated by our conscience, by God, by reason, by our stomach, or by our bile, or by our phlegm, like in the medieval theories of emotions that we can see here? Are you choleric? Are you melancholic? Or are you sanguine or phlegmatic? Focusing on the understanding of what we now call emotions in the West, in Western culture, one of the preeminent debates has been the battle of the reason against the passions. We see here in this illustration an example, a depiction of the chariot allegory by Plato, in which a charioteer, depicted there, representing logos or reason, is driving a chariot led by two horses, one representing moral impulses, and the other representing eros, or base desires. So you have here a representation of the soul, in which the passions, especially the desires, have to be reined in, and they are preventing us from soaring in our direction. This debate, which has not remained static, so the juxtaposition of reason and emotions is not a static debate in the West, informs our everyday lives in ways that seem sort of second nature to us. So when we ask ourselves who gets to be rational in Western culture, we inevitably arrive to the conclusion that those in power are narratively depicted as rational, because passions have been so devalued culturally and in such an effective way of denigrating the other. And so, for instance, women, non-Western cultures, LGBTQ people, lower class populations are always or are often depicted as ungovernable, historical, irrational, childish, etc. And I can choose so many examples, of this. I chose the title "Panic in the Streets," not only because I'm a film buff. It's the title of a 1950s film, and you can see also the posters here of 1950s films here. But because fear is often depicted as a very primal or natural animalistic emotion, and yet the portrayal of the city as this space in which the masses of people engage in emotional contagion between each other is such a current and modern narrative. Fear is also relevant when analyzing who are the enemies of a given society. In myths, urban legends, scary or science fiction movies, it's always illuminating to note who are the enemies, where do they come from, and what do they do, And you can see the historical women here depicted in 1950 science fiction films. On the other hand, you may ask yourself, surely not all emotions are depicted as bad in the West. And certainly, for myriad of motives at different points in time, certain emotions have been brought back from the depths, of perdition. So, for example, the feeling of compassion, later conceptualized as sympathy, later conceptualized as empathy, was embraced by Christian religion and later by academic disciplines such as psychology or even psychoanalysis. In 17th and 18th century, government and economic theories, reasonable passions were meant to be set against each other, against more destructive passions, or what they were conceived of destructive passions. So, for example, greed, not well perceived for plenty of time in the West, was refashioned as economic interest. So, economic interest could be heralded as a mild pacifier emotion against violence. In the 19th century, emotions made a comeback, as they were meant to be evocative of our true, genuine selves, of our individuality, of what being an individual meant, of creativity, of spirit, of what was to be truly human, was to be tap into those emotions. Often people could only access their emotions in wild nature, and you can see one of the illustrations there of a classic romantic painting of the hero or the individual against wild nature, Emotions such as motherly love, or familial love, or romantic love, youthful spirit and curiosity were heralded as an aspiration in romantic literature, which informs us immensely right now. Let me go ahead. Here we go. To clarify, this does not mean, for example, that people did not love each other romantically before the 19th century, or even the 12th centuries, if we're thinking about courtly love, for instance, in medieval and pre-medieval love poems, or that people do not experience romantic love in other cultures, of course not. But how romantic love, for example, or motherly love, is depicted and experienced culturally can be quite unique to each culture. At the same time, how certain emotions are culturally acceptable, emphasized or de-emphasized, can also be unique. So emotions such as anger or sadness can be depicted as socially and economically unproductive, while happiness and optimism can be portrayed as an obligation, both to yourself and to society. It can seem at times mandatory in the West to enjoy, to engage in all sorts of pleasures, to have fun. To this, some feminist theories have reclaimed themselves as killjoys, and younger generations have reclaimed sort of messy, unwanted emotions. I included this picture here of Serena Williams, because she was part of a controversy in which it was depicted in a caricature, a blatantly racist caricature, of her sort of being overly emotional in the field. And then she later reclaimed her emotions in a way that reframed the narrative about herself. So more than saying, let us all embrace sadness and anger, what I'm saying is like being aware of how emotions are not just felt, but they have a place contextually, geographically, historically, can be immensely helpful for personal life and for our work. If we sort of take a step back when researching and thinking, how are people feeling about a certain service or about a certain product? What does it mean for them to, disregard something, if they don't like something, if they hate something, if they're feeling sad about something, and feeling and analyzing that not only as sort of individual emotions, but emotions that are set in a context.